Hi, this is Rebecca with RL Designs. This is number 2 in the video series about the basics of sewing and using the sewing machine. So tonight what we're going to talk about is just getting to know your sewing machine a little bit. Keeping in mind that all sewing machines are going to be different. Mine happens to be a Brother machine, and it's about a middle of the line machine. But I started out with a 1979 Sears and Roebuck sewing machine, and it really served its purposes in teaching me about the machine. So no matter what kind of machine you have, from a very old one to the most elite with embroidery stitches and everything that you could use computerized, you'll be able to get to know your machine for what it is. So this thing can be extremely intimidating. I understand that. And so the first thing that we're going to want to do is to find out about the machine parts. So number 1, we're going to want to turn it on. So there will be a button somewhere on your machine to turn it on. And then it's going to have a cord that attaches to a foot pedal, which is how you will sew. I have my nice slippers on. And it also will plug into the wall. So once we have it plugged in, we're going to take a look at the most important tool in learning your machine. And that is your user manual. All machines from the manufacturer come with their own personal user manual. If you have gotten your machine from Craigslist or a garage sale or given to you and it doesn't have a manual, you can go online and easily find it on eBay or from the manufacturer itself. So when I get a new machine, the first thing that I do is I get the operation manual for that machine, and I start at the very beginning, and as I go through it, I get some scrap material, and I go through and I learn everything from threading the machine to threading the bobbin. There's lots of illustrations in your manual and lots of directions. So that's the number 1 way to learn your machine. But there's going to be a lot of things on my machine that I'll be able to teach you as I show you the different parts that you'll be able to find them on your machine as well. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the spool pin. And this is the spool pin up here on mine. My spool pin goes up and down, but some spool pins are, they run sideways. So your thread may go on this way and then thread on the machine, or they may go up and down. So that will just depend. We'll talk about threading in another video, so I won't go through all that. But I know that threading can be an intimidating thing, but with your manual you'll be able to do it. So let me just talk about one thing with threading really quickly. You'll notice on the top of my machine that there are directions here, and it gives some illustrations about threading. This is actually about the bobbin, but you'll see the numbers that mine, there's a number 2 right there that you can see a number 2. So here is number 1, here's number 2, number 3 is down here, and then 4 is back up at the top, and then 5 is at the bottom. So you'll be able to follow the numbers and the arrows in order to thread your machine, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's go back up to the top, where here we have the bobbin winder. The bobbin winder will be kind of in the shape of a bobbin, so that a bobbin can fit directly on top of it. And that's how you're going to wind. The same thread that is going through your machine is going to go on the bobbin. And there's going to be a specific way to do it. There's directions right up here on how to do it. They will also be in your manual. If we go to the side of the machine, all machines have a hand wheel. My son has put some lovely stickers on the side of mine. But a hand wheel is actually going to move, depending on how you move it, it's going to move your needle up and down. So if we turn the hand wheel toward ourselves, the needle is going to go down. And then if we turn it back, the needle will go up. So that's just good to know what that hand wheel is for. Now, let's go to this part of the machine where we're going to actually see what the foot of the machine is. This little contraption is a foot. This is a pretty standard foot, but all machines are going to come with different kinds of feet. You may have if you're going to sew a zipper, you'll have a different kind. If you're going to do a buttonhole, you'll do a different kind. But for our purposes right now, we're just going to stay with the standard foot. Every time you put material in your machine, you're going to lower the foot down onto the machine. And there's going to be a lever here on the side or in the back of your machine that will lower it or raise it up. So that will just keep everything in place. Let me just remove this foot. They're all very easily removable, so you can see what it looks like. It has a little lever there that can just easily attach back to the machine. Well, while the foot is out, let me just direct your attention to these little guys right here. These are called feed dogs, and I don't know if you can tell, but they have little grooves right in the top. And as you are sewing, these are going up and down, and they are feeding your material through. So we'll talk more about feed dogs later, as sometimes you'll be able to drop them. But for our purposes right now, we're just gonna leave the feed dogs alone so that you know where they are and what they are. This part of the machine that's metal, it can be metal or plastic, is the faceplate. And on the faceplate, you'll notice some markings here. In most pattern directions, it will say 5/8 of a seam allowance. And seam allowances are something that we'll talk about, but when you sew along a line, the standard measurement is to sew 5/8 out. Well, instead of having to eyeball that when you're sewing something, you just sew straight along that line. Each one of these markings is 1/4 of an inch, so if you decide you'd rather like an inch, you can come out to here. Here's an inch. And you have, so your needle's here, and you can thread your material through here. So this is just a really good guide to where you want your needle to come down and then where the fabric actually lies. This part of the machine is the bobbin that I was talking about. So this has a bobbin plate. Then every machine is going to have a bobbin plate. And then the bobbin is going to fit in here. Now some machines, the bobbin will be down, and some machines, they will actually be perpendicular. So they will come, so that the bobbin will be more up and down at that point. So you're gonna read your manual and figure out how exactly to put the bobbin in. It'll show you exactly where to put the thread so that you're able to draw that bobbin thread up when you're doing your sewing. So we'll just put this cover right back in. And there we go. So our bobbin is ready to go. Now, one thing that my machine has that I was pretty excited to find out is this little tiny mechanism right here. And you need to check if your machine has that, because a lot of people don't know. And this is actually a thread cutter. And right in there is a little tiny blade. And it just makes it really convenient to be able to cut your thread after you're done, so you don't have to use scissors. This is the first time in the first machine that I have used that has a thread cutter, so just check to see. It's not something that's necessary, but it's just a really nice feature if you do have that. Now on all machines, you will also have a way to backstitch, because when you backstitch, when you're sewing, not going forward but going backward, it locks the stitch in. So right here I have a button that is the backstitch button. Sometimes machines will have levers over here, and that will be a backstitch lever where you push it down and then sew, and your machine will actually feed backwards. It's rather cool. One thing else to point out is this knob up here, and sometimes you will have the knobs that'll be on top, sometimes they'll be on the side, but they'll have numbers like this, 1 through 5 usually. These are the tension levers, and as a beginning sewer, you really want to make sure that you do not touch the tension levers. That's a way that can really confuse people. If the tension is off, the stitches won't look correct, and sometimes it can knot up in your machine, and that's just something you don't want to have to deal with. So if you get a new machine straight from the manufacturer, it should be set in a good place, and it will address tension in your manual. Another thing that we need to talk about is the stitch selector. So mine actually has an LCD screen here that'll tell you the stitch number, the foot that I'm going to be using, and then the stitch width and length. And over here, you will see the different kinds of stitches. Now, not all machines have this or this variety of stitches. However, there will be certain ways, like if you want a zigzag stitch or you want a straight stitch, that you'll be able to choose your stitch. Like if we put, let's say we want number 2. Over here, number 2 is this stitch right here. So we know that that's what we will be using. If you wanted more of a zigzag stitch, we could take it up to number 4. Okay, and then here is the stitch width and length. There's a standard width and length that should come directly up, but you can fool around with that. If you brought the width up to a 5, that would mean that your stitches would be very far apart and large stitches, like for basting. So your manual will tell you what the standard stitch length and width should be. So that is basically all that you really need to know about your sewing machine when you're first beginning. I can't emphasize enough to go back to your manual. A lot of times I like to write notes within it as I figure out tricks, and I will refer back to my manual many times. So that's just something really important to get. Well, thanks for staying with me for this demonstration of the parts of a sewing machine. This is Rebecca with RL Designs. Make sure to like RL Designs on Facebook.